What's up, students? This is a quick review of what actually is fitness. I consider this like the Fitness 101 lecture. We're going to cover our 11 fitness components, our health enhancing and skill enhancing, and then jump through a couple of our essential principles. Not everything, but the very, very basics we all need to know. So a couple questions we need to ask. What actually is fitness? What does it mean to be fit? And we're going to go through a few different images, and I want you to consider who looks fit, what's your natural reaction of who looks fit, who doesn't. And I hope you pay attention not to the fact of someone or something being fit or not just by our aesthetic point of view, but what's your biases, what are you looking at, and kind of what's our bigger picture, which you'll get in a second. So I threw up this great visual of what fitness is. And so the first definition, condition being physically fit and healthy. Okay, great, but it doesn't really tell us what that is. So the second two I like a lot, the quality of being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task. This specifically, even if you look at the synonym suitability, this is pretty specific. So to fulfill a particular role or task, that adds this element of when in our society, when we're talking about someone who's fit enough to do something, it's going to relate to the thing that we want them to do. And we need to keep that in mind a little bit more as we look and define in physical culture what fitness actually is. And then the biological definition, ability to survive and reproduce in a particular environment. And so that's looking much more at the survival aspect, but again, still has that same idea of fulfilling a particular role or task. The suitability, specificity will survive and reproduce in a desert, or survive or reproduce in, an ice cap. That is related to some specific need that has to be there. So we move on. Is recreationally fit, is that a thing? Can you be fit from just a recreational standpoint, like our moms, dads, grandmas, people going to the gym just to move, to get their workout on? What about this person? Is she fit? Olympically fit? So this is actually in the Olympics. Here's LeBron. What about sport fit? Fit enough to do that particular sport, or the conditioning and the training that he's doing to become better? What about just raw strength? If you're great at raw strength, you're Steffi Cohen. Are you really fit then? Are you the fittest person? Are you the strongest person that's out there because you're doing powerlifting? What about marathon fit? One of the fastest recorded marathon, the fastest recorded marathon out there, breaking the 2-hour barrier. Is this a fit person? Is he fit? Is he fitter, more or less, than Steffi Cohen, or than LeBron James or Jenny Arthur that we just saw, or the recreational people we just saw? What about this is all women, functionally fit? So they definitely have a lot of musculature. We can describe that. It looks like they're moving in a fast pace. Looks like they're working on some agility and coordination, probably speed, just because of the angle of how they're moving, and looks like how they're traveling. So is functionally fit, does that mean you're fit if you can do different agility drills? What about this? Aesthetically fit. These are some of the best female physique competitors, bodybuilders out there. This is at the Honor World Sports Festival. So is this fit? Is this what fitness is to us? What about other aspects? So go even bigger, social fitness, quality of life, because you have a set of friends, you have people that you want to be around and want to be around you. Spiritual fitness. So looking at the bigger picture, some of our existential questions, suitable to meet your own needs there. Mental fitness. And then we even have moral fitness. So we can go pretty big in this definition of what fitness actually is. But for our intents and purposes, we have two main categories for it. On our left-hand side, we have our skill enhancing level of fitness. Sometimes it's called motor skill enhancing. And all of these components that we'll learn about in that skill enhancing area relate to performance. So whether it's work or sport, very specific to a particular task, and not in themselves, they are not essential to have sustained life, or even for quality of life. Even though I can argue, and many of us can argue, is that we could improve our quality of life by also improving our skill enhancing levels of fitness, but it does not guarantee it. On the other side, our health enhancing, prevention of disease, remediation of disease. So it's really, really focused on this disease factor, absence of disease or getting rid of disease, versus performance. These definitely do relate to our quality of life when it comes to health and our longevity potential. And then health enhancing level fitness, major component of the wellness spectrum. So here's our 5 areas of health enhancing fitness. You can see that list there. We have 2 in the muscular area: flexibility, cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory endurance, and body composition. So what do we know about body comp? A couple things that are interesting. This chart I put up here, this is a BMI chart, body mass index chart, because this is what we always think of, but body mass index is not actually body mass. It's not your body composition. We're talking about with composition, it's what makes up the body's mass. So BMI, for example, is not on this list, but I wanted to incorporate it just because it's what everyone thinks. BMI is just literally a graph measurement of your height and your weight, and it uses an equation to put you in a particular category of underweight, healthy, overweight, or obese. And so when we're looking at body composition, we're not looking at the mass itself. So mass is typically measured in weight, pounds or kilos. We're looking at what makes up that mass. It's kind of like, instead of the quantity, what's the quality of that mass, even though we can quantify things. So that's looking at our muscle, our non-adipose or non-fat tissue, bone, water, anything that's metabolically active. And then also on the flip side, looking at our fat tissue or non-metabolically active tissues. So a few different ways that we can measure it are listed here. Some are more financially or resource accessible, some are less. And considering why healthy body composition is important, it's going to be one of our questions that you'll see later in this unit or in your module. One of the simple reasons is it allows us, it's a major contributor to and connector to some of our chronic diseases that we have, allows us to move, allows us to achieve the outcomes for survival that we might need, because from a metabolic standpoint, we're able to handle what's going on. And so that's one of the things when we look at our lean to non-lean tissue or fat to non-fat mass, there are some connections that we are seeing in the research related to healthier body composition, and I put healthy in quotes, certain types of body composition related to others. But one thing we need to keep in mind is a healthy body composition is one that the user, the person, is knowledgeable of, is able to ask questions of, is able to have discussion of, is able to understand their role and their responsibility that they can have as a person in adjusting and adapting it, and also understanding some of the components and elements that might not be under their control. And for us as movement professionals, making sure that we can have conversations about body composition in a way that are inclusive and are supportive, especially if individuals are in states of wanting to make changes to their body composition, or if they're in stages where they think they should make changes because that's what is in our world around us, but it may not be necessary for either their health, their survival, their quality of life, or even the performance that they need to have. So BMI, I did mention that sample chart we got here. One of the things I know many of us are familiar with BMI is because it's only looking at height and weight. So weight can be manipulated, of course. Height, not so much. Once you are done growing, you're out of that pre-adolescent, adolescent phase, weight's really going to be the only way that you're going to be able to manipulate your BMI. And so this really contributes very much likely to why weight is one of our major key points that people want to adapt and adjust. Also, because the measurement of weight is easy to get. You just step on a scale, it weighs you. And so it's the most accessible, and the unit of measurement, if it's pounds or kilos, is very well understood in the general population. And from an insurance standpoint, medical standpoint, even research standpoint, it's the easiest information to gather from a participant. And so that's why we do see BMI used much more widely in data and in research, and a lot of us might be familiar with, depending on where we were at different stages in life, or a lot of athletes might be like, wait a second, I'm a high-level athlete, I feel very healthy, this is my lifestyle, I've gone to the doctor, I've gotten these checkups, can look at some of these specific health indicators, but I'm technically still in the overweight or obese category, and it's just because of what their mass is, and it's not looking at what that mass is actually comprised of, which is our composition. We see hydrostatic weighing, not common in the general population or in the fitness population. We see it more in a university or lab type setting, so you're weighed in and out of the water, and there's a correction for the air that's released from the lungs when under the water to get a value of that lean or non-lean tissue. Bioelectrical impedance. This one is something that we tend to see in the general fitness related field. This is a handheld device, an Omron device, one of the most popular brands that we see. This particular one, you hang onto it only with your hands. And so the hands, the upper body essentially are the only points where this very, very small electric current is going to go through. And it gives us, it computes our BMI just because it asks you for your height and your weight as well. But then it also computes a body fat percentage measurement. And the idea is that muscle resists current less than non-lean mass. And so it's able to factor out this percentage of fat versus non-fat mass in the body. Some challenges. These devices are about $100, which is pretty reasonable to be able to use widespread. It's non-invasive. Anyone can use it. You don't need a trained expert necessarily. But some challenges are because it's only using upper body, it's not taking into account maybe some variations that we might see in different body types if the lower body type is a little bit different. And then also is specifically related to our hydration levels, any sort of electrode or electric current type of device. If we're heavily underhydrated or dehydrated, it's going to give us some mixed results. And so with this, I usually take this when I do this with clients or athletes with a grain of salt and let them know it's not the end all be all number that they see here, because we can see some variations based off of hydration up to 1 to 2 percentage points. And that's kind of significant, especially if we're looking at some of the categories of underweight, healthy weight, overweight, and obese, and how the percentage body fat fits into them. But it is a nice way to get an objective number for someone. DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It looks at specifically bone density is one of the main reasons that you'll see this in a lab or at a hospital. We have one of these here at Eastern Michigan University. And so it uses this idea of kind of like an open scan. And looks specifically, I mentioned bone density, looks at our lean soft tissue and non-lean tissue. And so it gives us a general image, visual images of where we're holding tissue that's lean versus non-lean tissue. There's different colorings in the images. You can't just do this on your own. You do need someone who's trained to take you through that process, but you get some really interesting data about your mass distribution and the composition of the mass in different parts of the body, and even your balance is how, if you have symmetry instead of just only visual symmetry, but actually what you're comprised of left to right. So really interesting type of scan. At Eastern, we offer this through the Office of Eagle Nutrition Services. There are rates for students, for faculty, and for community members. And this is the type of assessment that I would recommend if there's accessibility to it for a client to do once a year, especially as they age, to be looking at their bone density and possible changes. It gives you some other indicators on the reports, such as a potential bone age or a calculated bone age based off of the density levels that are being shown. Next, cardiovascular, sometimes called cardiorespiratory endurance or aerobic endurance is another thing, or another area we see of this category. So this is essentially, this is prolonged, dynamic, large muscle group exercise, moderate, sometimes to high intensity, but more in that moderate to high range. It's measured through a VO2 max, which if you've taken XPhys, you've had that. We also see some common measurements of 1 mile walk, step test 3 minutes, 1.5 mile run or walk, and then the pacer, which is the our progressive aerobic cardiorespiratory endurance run. And healthy cardiovascular endurance is just necessary for us to be able to do things with stamina and for us to not tire too quickly and being able to endure. The word endurance is exactly in that. Definitely has major connections to prevention and maintenance of healthy bodies, especially related to chronic disease, which is why it's in that health-related fitness area. You see VO2 max, I mentioned in exercise physiology. In your labs, you'll do this test. It's progressive or graded aerobic energy test. And we're looking at the level where oxygen consumption is steady, even with increasing workload. And so it looks at our ventilation. Pacer essentially is a 20-meter back and forth run where we have, it's a timed cadence. So you have 20-meter segments and intervals. There's beeps on a recording where you need to get from point A to point B before the beep happens, and then back from point B to point A before the next beep happens, and then so on and so on. Each round or each level, a couple levels of rounds, the cadence or the interval required pace will increase. So with this, it is continuous. because you are moving back and forth, but it's not a steady state kind of test like a mile run might potentially be, and because we have a lot of change of direction in it too. So that requires a bit more of extra energy from a metabolic standpoint. Flexibility, it's our ability to move a joint through a range of motion. So we see a goniometer as our main measure of assessing it. So it's the flexibility of a particular joint. And we have a few ways we measure it. So goniometer, sit and reach we see in the FitnessGram test, that's with kids, and then a FitnessGram shoulder stretch. That's the other area that we might see in a PE type of setting. Other measurements that we see, functional rehab specialists, physical therapists will do that are going to actually use a tool like a goniometer. Healthy flexibility, because it's related to our ability to move through a range of motion, that's so key. Every single thing is attached to this. If we don't have this bare minimum ability to move the joint through a range that's necessary for what we need to do or to let us move in some of these health enhancing movements, that's definitely problematic and is going to be a major limiter. All right, muscular strength. So keep in mind that strength is the maximum amount of force that a muscle or muscle group can produce in a specific amount of time. And so we typically measure it through rep max tests. So 1 rep, sometimes 3 rep max tests. And we know that strength is important to just support our body, our skeletal system. It helps keep our bone density up. And then we need it to do specific work or functional movements in our lives. Muscular endurance. Key thing here is the continuous contraction of a muscle or muscle group. So this should be contract continuously. It's measured in physical education through a dynamic curl up and a dynamic push up test. Lots of other ways that you can measure it. So 1 minute of work, circuit-based types of tests, even particular workouts that have a repeated movement over and over again or higher volume number of movements over and over again, specifically in a given amount of time. And it's important for us if we want to actually do anything more than one time and maintain an effort. So like a rock climber, this is muscular endurance. There's other components of fitness for sure that we see at work here, but to be able to hold on, to have that type of endurance from a muscular level, to hold on to holds, to hold on to a specific spot, breathe while you're adjusting feet and positioning and your lead lines, definitely need muscular endurance. That brings us to switching over. So we're looking now at the 6 components of skill related or skill enhancing fitness. So we have agility, balance, coordination, power, reaction time, and speed here. So these components, we have agility. It's our body's ability to move accurately. So that's with coordination, which is coming up, with speed and in different directions. And so it's necessary for several different sports are really, really key in agility. Balance, that's our ability's body to maintain or return to equilibrium while we're moving or while we're stationary. And so many sports are going to incorporate this at various points and levels. Coordination is using our body parts while performing motor skills smoothly, efficiently, accurately, and sometimes quickly. So we see this in really anything where we're manipulating an object, including ourselves. Power, we're transferring energy into force at a very, very fast rate. So we see this in a lot of our anaerobic types of sports, doing a block in football, 60, 100 meter dash, shot put, Olympic weightlifting, a lot of power involved here. Reaction time, this is the amount of time that elapses between a stimulus and then a response to the stimulus. And so we see in anything where there's a start or a change of possession in a game, for example, so turnover is a great situation, and even being able to react to movement of people or objects on a field of play. Speed relates to just performance of a movement and the amount of time it takes you to do it. So plenty of activities in common sports, we see this. And then keeping in mind also, what is fitness? This can be fitness. When we're talking about progressive overload, we're looking at improving in the fitness that we're doing. So whether it's health related or health enhancing or skill related or skill enhancing. So it's a gradual increase in intensity, amount, time, or type of exercise, or a combination of these. And so story I commonly tell is Milo of Croton. So when he was a young boy, he would carry this baby calf up a mountain every single day. And of course, over time, that baby calf grew. So that's increasing the intensity, the load that he's ultimately carrying. He gets a little bit stronger. Then that bull gets to full size, load continues to increase, which is the intensity, and he gets even stronger yet. And so it's a clear space that helps us understand this idea of what overload is for us. See the FIT principle. So have to memorize this. Frequency is how often. So 3 times a week, 1 time a week, 1 time a day, 2 times a day. And so here's an example from the cardiorespiratory or aerobic recommendation from ACSM. So from a FIT principle standpoint, 3 to 5 times a week of aerobic exercise, and because it's related to our body's ability to rebuild and recover. Intensity is the level of stress that we are working at. Could be perceived, could be objective, like actual mass, like pounds or kilos that you might be lifting. And so basically, this is what we are going to change progressively and typically increase it in our training program to achieve forward progress, to achieve an outcome. And so if we're talking about aerobic exercise, the ACSM recommends 60 to 90% of our max heart rate. Not maxing out all the time or redlining in an aerobic way. It's in this moderate to high heart rate. And we call that moderate to vigorous physical activity, MVPA. Time is, of course, duration of a session or how long. And so again, recommended 30 to 60 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week at 60 to 90% moderate heart rate. That's moderate to vigorous physical activity. Time could also incorporate if we are doing a type of work that might incorporate sets or reps. So instead of if it's moving for 5 minutes continuously, maybe it's 3 sets of 6 reps. And even though it's not necessarily time, that will take a set of time. So it's 3 sets, 6 reps, and you might even have your rest or recovery programmed in that space. So that does relate to our duration that we have, essentially volume of the movement or of the workout. And then time or type essentially is what are we doing? The kind of exercise or physical activity, the variety, like these recommendations. This was a cardio recommendation, but also we want to incorporate our other elements of health enhancing or skill enhancing levels of fitness. Something else we need to know when it relates to aerobic training that uses oxygen, we have continuous, sometimes called steady state aerobic activity. It's sustained, duration is the same, and then it's a pace or intensity that is manageable over time. That's how we know it's aerobic, but something we can continuously do. Interval training is typically still part of aerobic exercise, but it often is going to be more intense because there are exercise periods and rest periods. So we get more intensity potentially over the same amount of time that we're going to be doing our steady state activity at. How do we measure moderate to vigorous activity? Tons and tons of activity monitors out there, GPS devices, Whoops, old school pedometers, watches, heart rate monitors, lots of things that are out there in society. And one thing is most of these are technology related. And other than the good old stopwatch, there's a lot of changes in technology over time that we need to keep up on as trainers, as PE teachers, as strength coaches. And the challenge with that is it's just a constant pursuit of what's out there, what's next, what does the evidence say about it, what do reviews say about these products, while looking at cost to benefit ratios as well. So how much exercise is needed when we're just talking about straight up movement? And so I mentioned 30 minutes minimum, moderate to vigorous activity, and also at least 2 days a week of muscle strengthening activities are recommended. So, moderate to vigorous, that's looking at our, 60 to a max of 90 heart rate. And then we know that health benefits can be gained at 10-minute increments or more. So does it mean that to get your 30 minutes or your 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity in each day of the week as an adult? Doesn't have to be a 30-minute block. It could be 10 minutes in the morning, midday, and 10 minutes in the evening. Our youth recommendations are 60 minutes daily of moderate to vigorous activity, and we should have vigorous bouts in at least 3 days a week. So that's pushing those higher levels of heart rate. And then we also want muscle and bone strengthening activity to be included as well.